The day I met her, I was already running 15 minutes to meet her. That probably sounds like the kind of irony you'd read in a paperback at an airport gift shop. I know. But it happened, and I still don't have a better way to explain it than to just tell you exactly how it went. My name's not important right now. What matters is that I'm 31. I work as a licensed electrician out of Guelph, Ontario, and I have what my sister Paige calls a stubborn habit of doing things the hard way. She's not wrong. I've been wiring circuits since I was 19. I drive a 10-year-old Ram 1500 with a crack in the windshield I keep meaning to get fixed. And I am, historically, not great at first impressions with women I'm supposed to impress. Which is exactly why I told Paige 2 weeks before all of this that I didn't want to go on a blind date. You don't have to want to, she said. You just have to show up. She'd set the whole thing up with a woman she worked with at the school board office in Hamilton. Her name was Renata, the co-worker, I mean. And apparently Renata had a younger sister who was, and I'm quoting Paige here, the kind of person who makes you feel like you've known her for years within about 4 minutes. I'd been single for 2 years by then. My last relationship ended the way a lot of things end, not badly, just quietly, like a fire that runs out of fuel before anyone notices. So when Paige pushed, I stopped pushing back. We were supposed to meet at a place called the Mallard Table in downtown Hamilton, a gastropub, the kind with reclaimed wood everywhere and a chalkboard menu that changes weekly. I'd looked it up online the night before, not because I was excited, but because I'm the type of person who needs to know where I'm parking before I get somewhere. I had a spot picked out 3 blocks over, I had a reservation under my name, and I had what I thought was enough time to drive from Guelph, clean up, and be there at 7. What I didn't have was any idea that the QEW would be backed up from Burlington to the Skyway. By the time I cleared the bridge and was coming down onto Barton Street, I was already 12 minutes late. I was still in the clothes I'd changed into at the shop, a clean flannel over a gray Henley, which is about as dressed up as I get on short notice, and I was telling myself it was fine, that I'd text when I found parking, that a few minutes late was normal, that she probably wasn't even there yet. I turned off onto a quieter residential street to cut toward the lot I'd found online, and that's when I saw the car. It was a silver Civic, maybe 8 or 9 years old, pulled half off the road with the hazards going. The trunk was open. A woman was standing behind it, crouched down, looking at one of the rear tires like she was waiting for it to explain itself. I almost kept driving. I want to be honest about that. I was late, I was already wound up, and I told myself she probably had it handled, had a roadside plan, had someone coming. I actually slowed down and then accelerated again, and then something, I don't know what, exactly, made me pull over. I still can't fully explain it. Maybe it was the way she was looking at the tire. Like she already knew what was wrong but was hoping she was mistaken. I recognize that look. I make it at fuse panels sometimes. I rolled down my window. You need a hand? She straightened up. She was wearing a dark green coat, the nice kind, the kind you wear when you're going somewhere, and her hair was loose around her shoulders and she had a look on her face that was equal parts relieved and resigned. That depends, she said. Do you know anything about flat tires? A little. Then yes. Please. I pulled further off the road, put on my hazards, and got out. Her name was Lily. She told me within about 30 seconds before I'd even looked at the tire, because she said she had this thing about not liking strangers and that knowing a name helped. I told her mine. She nodded like she was filing it away. How long have you been here? I asked. 22 minutes, she said. I know because I've been watching my phone die in real time and calculating how late I'm going to be. Late for something? Dinner, she said. And then, after a pause, a thing. Something in the way she said it made me not ask more. I crouched down next to the tire. It was flat, completely flat, the kind that doesn't leave you wondering. I could see where it had gone. A long split in the sidewall, not a nail, just a bad piece of luck on a rough winter road. You've got a spare? I've got something that I was told is a spare, she said. It's in the trunk. I've never actually had to use it. I went to the trunk with her. She'd already pulled most of the stuff out. A reusable grocery bag, a yoga mat in a canvas case, a bag of rock salt she said she'd been meaning to drop at her mother's place for 3 weeks, and underneath the floor panel was a compact spare. One of those temporary ones. Donut tire. Good enough to get her where she needed to go. Okay, I said. This'll work. It'll get you to a shop, but don't push it on the highway. 60 kilometers an hour max. I wasn't planning to go on the highway, she said. I'm going about 8 blocks from here. Then you're fine. She hovered while I got the jack from under the Civic. She wasn't the kind of person who steps back and watch. She was right there, handing me things before I asked, asking questions that actually made sense, like she was trying to understand the process rather than just get through it. Is that the cross wrench? She asked, pointing. Lug wrench, I said. Is there a difference? Not really, I admitted. Cross wrench, lug wrench. People use both. So, why did you correct me? I looked up at her. She was completely serious, which somehow made it funnier. Habit, I said. She laughed. It was a short, surprised laugh, like she hadn't expected to find anything funny right then. We worked through it. I loosened the lug nuts. She held the flashlight on her phone steady, even though her hands must have been cold, because it was October, and neither of us had gloves on. I jacked the car up, pulled the flat, fitted the spare. She watched the whole thing without looking away, which I noticed because most people don't. Most people check their phone or stare at the road. She watched like she was actually going to remember it. You do this a lot? She asked. Change tires? Help strangers. I thought about that. Not often enough, probably. She was quiet for a second. Then, that's a good answer. I tightened the lug nuts in the star pattern, brought the car back down, checked my work. Solid. I threw the flat in her trunk and put everything else back. She watched me close the trunk. Thank you, she said. She said it simply, the way people say things when they actually mean them and aren't trying to dress it up. Genuinely. I was starting to think this whole evening was a sign. A sign of what? She shook her head a little, smiled. Nothing. Never mind. I'm just thank you. Really. She got in her car. I watched her pull out carefully, hazards still going for half a block until she turned them off, and then she was gone. I looked at my hands. I was late before I stopped. I was later now, and my hands were covered in road grime and tire dust, which is a specific kind of dirty, the kind that gets into your knuckles and doesn't come out with a quick rinse. I walked back to my truck and sat there for a minute. I texted Paige. Running late. There was a situation on the road. She texted back immediately, which meant she was watching her phone. Define situation someone's tire. Of course it was. Get there. I drove the 3 blocks to the parking lot, found a spot, and walked to the Mallard table. The host was standing near the door and gave me the specific smile that people give when they're too polite to say anything about your hands. Reservation? He said. I gave him my name. He led me toward the back of the room, past the bar and a couple of high-top tables, through a narrow section with exposed brick on one side and low pendant lights overhead. I was looking at the floor as I walked, partly because I was watching where I was stepping, partly because I was trying to figure out how to open a conversation with a stranger when you're 20 minutes late and your hands look like you've been under a vehicle. Which, to be fair, you have. The host stopped at a corner booth. I looked up. She was already looking at me. It took about 2 full seconds. The green coat was over the back of the booth. Her hair was loose, same as before. She had her hands wrapped around a glass of water, and she was staring at me with an expression as the human equivalent of putting 2 and 2 together and getting a result you weren't expecting. You have got to be kidding me, she said. Hi, I said. She stopped. Started again. You're my blind date. I'm starting to think so, yes. Neither of us said anything for a second. The host, to his absolute credit, set down a menu for me, said he'd give us a moment, and walked away immediately. I sat down across from her. Lily had her chin tilted down and was looking at me from under her eyebrows, which I would come to learn is what she looks like when she's trying to decide whether something is funny or catastrophic. Your hands, she said. I looked at them. Yeah, from my car. From your car. She pressed her lips together. I could see her working through it. The timeline, the details, the fact that I had been crouched next to her rear wheel for 20 minutes while she held her phone flashlight steady, and neither of us had made the connection, and now here we were. Paige is your sister, she said. It wasn't a question. Older sister. Yeah. Renata is my Corker's younger sister. She paused. I'm the younger sister. I figured. She looked at her water glass, looked back at me. You corrected me about the wrench, the lug wrench. Yes, you're going to be like that, aren't you? And here's the thing, and I think this is the part of the story that I keep coming back to, the part that I couldn't have planned even if I'd tried. When she said that, She wasn't annoyed. She was almost smiling. There was something in her voice that said she'd already taken stock of the situation and made a decision about it. And the decision was that this was going to be okay. I flagged down a server and asked if there was a washroom. There was. It took me a few minutes. The grime on my hands is the stubborn kind. I ended up using the hand soap 3 times and scrubbing with a paper towel until I got most of it. I stood at the mirror for a second before heading back out. Flannel shirt, slightly damp from the cold. A crease across my forearm from where I'd braced on the wheel well. I looked exactly like what I was, an electrician who'd just changed a tire in October on the shoulder of a residential street in Hamilton. When I got back to the table, Lily had ordered 2 beers and moved the candle to the side so there was more space between us. I ordered you a Collective Arts, she said. Is that okay? I didn't know what you wanted, but they're local, so I figured it was safe. Collective Arts is brewed out of Hamilton. She was right that it was safe. It was also, I noted, a thoughtful thing to do for a person you'd met twice in one evening, both times without knowing who they were. That's good, I said. Thank you. She picked up her glass. I picked up mine. So, she said. So, I said. I'm Lily Marsh. She said it like a restart, like we were beginning again from the top with full information. I know, I said. Paige told me your name. I paused. She didn't tell me you'd be the one with the flat tire. Renata didn't tell me you'd be the one who'd stop. We looked at each other for a second. Something settled between us, the way things settle when 2 people decide, more or less at the same time, that they're going to stop being nervous. You have questions, she said. Go. I did have questions, I asked them. She answered. She asked hers back. Lily was 30 years old, and she worked as a speech-language pathologist through a practice in Hamilton. She'd grown up in Dundas, gone to Western for her undergrad, then up to the University of Ottawa for her master's. She'd moved back to Hamilton 3 years ago when a job opened up, rented a place on the mountain, and had been there since. She liked the city in a way that surprised me. She could talk about specific neighborhoods, specific streets, specific things she liked about living somewhere that had a real history to it, instead of just being new. I told her about the electrical work, about running my own small operation, just me and 2 guys I'd brought on 18 months ago, mostly residential contracts, some commercial. About growing up in Cambridge, moving to Guelph for the apprenticeship, staying because the work was there and the rent was manageable, and I'd never found a good enough reason to leave. She asked about the truck. I told her about the truck. The cracked windshield, she said. I know. I keep meaning to get it fixed. It's illegal, you know. Impairs your sightline. It's on my list. What's above it on the list? I thought about it. Replacing the weather stripping on my back door. Reorganizing the supply room at the shop. Calling my dad back. She tilted her head. How long has that last one been on the list? About 3 weeks. Call your dad, she said. I will tonight, she said. When you get home, just do it. I looked at her. She was completely serious, the same way she'd been serious about the wrench, and I recognized something in it. That this was not a person who said things as filler. When she said something, she meant it. When she asked a question, she wanted the actual answer. I told her I would. And later that night, driving back to Guelph on the 403, I did. We ate. The food was good. I had a bison burger with garlic aioli and a side of roasted fingerlings, which I mention only because I remember it clearly, the way you remember small details of evenings that matter. She had the mushroom flatbread and ate it with more precision than I've ever seen anyone eat a flatbread, cutting it into neat sections before touching any of it. You're very organized, I said. I work with children all day, she said. Structure is how I stay functional. What kind of children? She told me. Kids with speech delays, language processing difficulties, some with conditions that made communication genuinely hard, apraxia, stuttering, kids who'd had strokes young, kids who'd had injuries. She talked about it the way people talk about things they've chosen on purpose, not just ended up in. There was something careful and focused in the way she described it, like she'd thought about why it mattered and kept landing on the same answer. Does it wear you out? I asked. She considered it. Sometimes. But the days it doesn't are. She paused. On good days, you watch a kid say something they couldn't say 6 months ago, and it's like, you know when you fix a circuit and the lights come on? It's like that. I looked at her. What? She said. That's exactly what it's like, I said. She smiled. Not the polite kind. The real kind, the one that changes the whole shape of a person's face. Somewhere around 9 o'clock, the place started to fill up more. It was a Friday, and we both leaned in a little without really thinking about it, which is the kind of thing that happens when a conversation has somewhere to go and neither person wants to slow it down for the sake of volume. She told me about the worst first date she'd ever been on, which involved a man who spent 45 minutes explaining the rules of a board game to her unprompted. I told her about the time I accidentally showed up to the wrong restaurant for a date. Same street, different city. I'd gotten the address wrong and sat there for 20 minutes wondering why my date wasn't responding to texts before I figured it out. She laughed so hard she had to put down her glass. "You just sat there?" "I ordered an appetizer," I said. I didn't want to waste a good parking spot. She was still laughing. "This is the most Canadian story I've ever heard." "I tipped well," I said. "I felt bad for the server." "Of course you did. We stayed until they started dimming the lights, which is how a good gastropub tells you it's getting late without being rude about it." We walked out together. The October air had gotten colder while we were inside, the kind of cold that comes off Lake Ontario and settles in for the long haul, and Lily pulled her coat tighter, and we stood on the sidewalk for a moment in the particular awkwardness of an evening that went better than either person expected. "So," she said again. "So," I said again. "I think Paige and Renata are going to be insufferable about this." "Absolutely," I said. "For years, probably." She looked at me. "It was a good night. It was a really good night. Even with the tire." "Especially with the tire," I said. She smiled. "I'm going to Uber back. My car's at the shop. I dropped it off before I came here." She'd called ahead after I'd left her on the road, arranged for a tow. Organized. Of course she had. "Smart," I said. "I'm a planner," she said. Usually. She laughed again, quieter this time, and pulled out her phone to open the app. The screen lit up her face for a second, the good light of an evening that hadn't gone the way either of us had braced for. "You should get your windshield fixed," she said, without looking up from her phone. "I'll put it higher on the list." She looked up. "Below or above calling your dad?" "Below," I said. "Dad stays at the top." Something crossed her face. I don't have a better word for it than warm. Just warm. "Good," she said. Her ride pulled up a few minutes later. She got in, turned back once through the window, and then the car turned the corner and was gone. I walked back to my truck. I sat in it for a minute before starting it, which is a thing I do when I need to settle something in my mind. The city was doing what Hamilton does at 10 on a Friday. Still alive. Somewhere between loud and quiet, the CN Rail Bridge lit up orange to the north. I thought about the fact that I'd almost kept driving, that I'd actually let my foot lift off the brake and press the accelerator before something made me stop. I think about that part more than I probably should. Not in a fatalistic way. I'm not the type to read too much into things. But there's something true about the fact that the whole evening, the whole conversation, the flatbread and the bison burger, and the part where she said it's like that and meant it, all of it started because I pulled over when I didn't have to. That's the part Paige would call sentimental. She's probably right. I texted her from the parking lot. It went well. She texted back so fast it had to have been ready. "I know I knew it told you then. Details. All of them. Tomorrow." I drove home on the 403. The night was clear, no rain. The highway mostly empty. I had the windows up and the heat low and the radio off, which is how I drive when I'm thinking. Around Milton, I called my dad. He picked up on the second ring, which meant he'd been awake, which meant he was probably watching the late news in the kitchen the way he always does. We talked for about 20 minutes. Nothing important, how the shop was going, whether I'd had the truck looked at lately, whether I was eating actual food or just gas station sandwiches on the job. The usual. But I hadn't called in 3 weeks and I could hear in his voice that it was good that I had. And that's the thing about lists. Some things on them matter more than the list makes them sound. I got home a little after 11. Guelph was quiet. I walked up to my apartment on the second floor of an old triplex on Paisley Road. The building is from the 50s. The basement's critique. The landlord is a retired machinist named Gord, who lives on the main floor and knows everything about everyone, and I sat on my couch without turning on any lights. It was a good night. I didn't know then what would happen next. I didn't know that Lily would text me 2 days later, asking if I wanted to go to a winter market at Westdale in Hamilton. or that I'd say yes, or that we'd spend 4 hours there in November weather eating beaver tails and arguing in the best possible way about whether white or colored Christmas lights look better on a Victorian house. I didn't know she'd meet my dad at Christmas and spend an hour asking him about the fishing camp he and his brother used to run in Northern Ontario. I didn't know any of it. All I knew, sitting on the couch in the dark in Guelph, was that I'd pulled over for someone who turned out to be exactly the person I was already on my way to meet, and that somehow, because of grease on my hands and a donut spare and a lug wrench that isn't technically different from a cross wrench, we'd had an honest hour together before either of us knew we were supposed to be making an impression. And by the time we sat down at the Maillard table, there was nothing left to perform. That, I think, is the part that mattered.